after 9/11, started organizing around all of the civil liberties abuses of the Bush administration. We sued the Bush administration. We won. We stopped the deportations of 4,000 Somalis across the country. Thank you. Thank you. And that's how Rashida and I met, because she was an organizer too. And when I think about the progressive movement and the strength of the progressive movement and what Bernie Sanders is talking about, he is talking about being organizer-in-chief, which means there is an organizing movement across the country fighting for that ideal America, fighting for us to have justice in our homes and on the streets and in our workplaces. And for me as a progressive, I like to say that being progressive just means that you're the first to the best and most just idea, right? Because I remember fighting for a $15 minimum wage. Now, Bernie Sanders was fighting for a living wage back in 1993, by the way. But Seattle became the first city in the country to pass a $15 minimum wage, and I was on that committee that made that happen. But that happened because there was a movement of fast food workers who walked out on their jobs and took the risks in New York City, in Seattle, in places across the country. They were the ones who built that movement that allowed the rest of us then to activate and to actually get policy passed. And what I realized, because forming the largest immigrant advocacy organization in the state, one of the largest in the country, being arrested in civil disobedience protests 3 times, because I believe we need a lot of tactics in our toolbox, and we need to make sure we're using policy advocacy, but also civil disobedience, protests. There are all kinds of ways that the progressive movement is organizing. And what Bernie Sanders has understood is that we need to move way past the myth of the likely voter to the truth of every voter. And so that activation of an expanded electorate, that election of more women of color. Let me ask you this. Does anybody know how many women of color have been elected in the history of Congress? Out of over 11,000 members who have been elected to Congress, you got a guess for how many women of color have been elected? Somebody said less than 10. 79 in the history of the country. And here's 3 right here. Okay? So over 11,000 people have served in Congress since the founding of our country, and only 79 women of color. And so when we think about what that means and what Rashida is talking about in environmental justice, what Ilhan is talking about with housing justice, and then for me, it's been about Medicare for all. That's how I met Bernie Sanders on expanding Social Security, minimum wage, and Medicare for all back in 2016. And I was the first elected official to endorse Bernie Sanders because I was like, yes, this man is talking about what the country needs, but not just talking about it, building a movement. And so now in the House of Representatives, my bill has over half of the Democratic caucus on it. We've had 4 hearings. We're about to have a 5th. For the first time in the history of the House of Representatives, we have had hearings on Medicare for all and universal health care for everybody. And that's because of you all. And so the strength of the progressive movement and what Bernie is trying to do is really to say, this can't be just about one person in the Oval Office. It can't be, because you can't get anything done that way. What we're trying to do is do revolutionary, institutional change. We are saying that racism, sexism, and classism are intertwined, and you cannot address one without addressing the other, and that requires that we actually overturn some of the systems that we have right now. Dr. King, during his I Have a Dream speech, said, we cannot engage in the luxury of cooling off. We cannot take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. We cannot have chewing around the edges, a little bit here, a little bit there. But no, we have to take on those private insurance companies, those big pharmaceutical companies, the big fossil fuel companies. We have to take on the private equity firms that are buying up housing. We have to take on those moneyed interests that think that somehow they deserve more than you do. And our vision is very, very different. Our vision is that we need structural, systemic change. And let me tell you something. The guy in the White House is both a symptom and a cause, okay? He is horrible, he is xenophobic, he is racist, he is sexist, we can say everything. He lies all the time. But he is both a symptom and a cause. He got elected because there's too much suffering across the country. And the progressive movement that Bernie is building and that you are building is actually part of fixing those structural problems that somehow have only 3 people in the country, 2 of whom live in my state, having the same amount of wealth as 160 million people. That is wrong, and we will not accept it. And Bernie Sanders is going to change that. And this movement for progressive change and a diverse Congress and members who are actually representing the people, and every single one of you in the room that is going to stand up and go out and make sure that people turn out to this caucus on Monday. That is what is going to change us. That is what revolution is about. That is what it means to bring around systemic change. And it's up to you, Iowa. No pressure, but we got 3 days. And what happens in Iowa does not stay in Iowa. What happens in Iowa goes to New Hampshire and goes to every other state across the country. So we are counting on you to turn it out for Senator Bernie Sanders, the next president of the United States of America.
Iowa, we have 3 days. I don't remember if you guys remember last week when someone by the name of Hillary Clinton said that nobody, we're not going to boo, we're classy here. We're classy.
I'll boo. You all know I can't be quiet. No, we're going to boo. That's all right. The haters will shut up on Monday when we win.
There we go. I was going to say, a hater said, by the name of Hillary Clinton, we calling names out here, taking shots, that nobody likes Bernie Sanders. Unbelievable. We have 3 days to show the entire country how much we like Bernie Sanders, and it starts here in Iowa. Y'all, we can't take this moment for granted, so y'all gotta call your mama, your auntie, your cousin, your friends, your neighbors, right? And we gotta do work these next 3 days. Are y'all ready to do some work? Cool, well, tonight we're gonna have fun. Tomorrow we get to work. Help me one more time in thanking these 3 congresswomen.